Hey guys, tonight we're heading far back roughly. So new it was still surprising when it didn't T-bend like a stick. This is the Bronze Age. You're standing in the middle of a dusty city maybe somewhere along the Nile or the Indus. The sun is blazing down. Bronze tools flash in the hands of traders, and the air is thick with the tang of donkey sweat, baked fish, and spice. Children chase one another between rows of clay jugs, and somewhere nearby, a priest is yelling at a potter for making a bowl 1 shekel too shallow. This isn't prehistory anymore, people. Right now, they farm, they fight, they make wedding contracts and build towers for gods. You, however, probably wouldn't last more than a day here. The toilets are primitive. There's no Wi-Fi. And the mosquitoes, they do not take prisoners. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you? I'd love to know who else is lying in the dark right now, drifting gently back to 3000 BCE with us. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, barefoot on clay that's cracked like dragon skin under the morning heat. Around you, tall mud brick buildings loom multi-storied, many with balconies. Some even have plumbing. Not great plumbing, sure, but running water counts for something. A woman waves at you from a rooftop where she's spreading linens to dry. Below her, a man is polishing bronze blades and weighing them beside fish hooks and chisels. You notice how dull the copper tools nearby look by comparison, so soft and bendy. They practically sigh under pressure. This gleaming stuff is bronze, and it changes everything. The Bronze Age begins when humans, somewhere around 3300 BCE in the Near East, first discover that if you mix copper with a little tin, just a whisper of it, really you get something stronger, sharper, and shinier. Bronze doesn't bend as easily, doesn't corrode as quickly, and holds an edge long enough to make both warriors and farmers grin. You pass a stall where merchants sell bronze needles and knives. Another offers axes, spears, a fish scaler shaped like a fish. There's even jewelry-wide cuffs, snake-shaped rings, and tiny hammered charms shaped like bulls or lotus blossoms. It's not cheap, though. Bronze is expensive. Copper is rare. Tin is rarer. To get it, traders travel for months along dangerous roads, sailing up rivers, crossing mountains, and you thought your commute was bad. A group of scribes, young men, and one very tired, older woman squat in the shade, bent over tablets. They use styluses to etch tiny wedge shapes into soft clay, recording trade records, temple donations, and probably the ancient version of Dave still owes me the goats. You duck into a side alley and stumble onto a tiny forge. The heat hits you like a wall. Inside, a shirtless man and his teenage apprentice pump bellows. A crucible glows. Then, the moment. They pour the molten bronze into a carved stone mold. It sizzles. Steam rises, and slowly, as it cools, the shape of a dagger begins to form. You can't help but stare. That blade's still soft, but hardening fast represents a kind of revolution. Historians still argue whether the Bronze Age was a sudden shift or a slow evolution. Some regions adopted it quickly, like Mesopotamia in Egypt. Others took their time, and others, still sub-Saharan Africa, the Americas, had entirely different paths, relying on stone and bone for far longer. But here, in this moment, bronze is everything. It cuts down forests. It builds empires. It rewrites warfare and crafts. A kid darts past you holding a slingshot and wearing a bronze bangle so wide it could double as a shield. Someone's cooking lentils with garlic nearby. A dog yawns in the shade of a temple pillar. And high above it all, the gods watch, their statues gleaming in what else? Bronze. You take a step closer to the forge, where the apprentice barely a teen, skin darkened by soot, and sungrins at your interest. He dips a carved wooden ladle into a tub of water, then splashes the now-cooled dagger mold, sending up a hiss of steam and the sharp scent of hot metal. It's not a perfect blade, yet still rough, still waiting for a final polish, but it's unmistakably bronze. The craftsman leans over it with a critical eye, using a sandstone block to smooth the edges. Around you, the whole smelting process hums like a well-practiced ritual. Science and sheer determination not to burn one's eyebrows off. Making bronze isn't easy. First, you need copper. That means sending someone out to dig up greenish rocks in places like Cyprus or the Sinai. Then you need tin far rarer, found in places like Afghanistan or Cornwall. That tin has to be hauled across deserts, mountain ranges, and seas, usually by camel, or a guy with really strong shoulders and questionable life choices. Then comes inside the small forge. You notice a row of crucibles, thick clay pots, designed to withstand infernal temperatures. Each one glows faintly from within like it holds a piece of the sun. The fire is stoked constantly, fanned by bellows made from goatskin and wood. You duck as sparks leap from the hearth. Smelting copper requires a temperature of around 1,100 degrees Celsius. Small feat when your toolkit consists of sticks, mud, and optimism. To achieve that heat, Bronze Age metallurgists used charcoal as fuel and clever airflow systems to keep the blaze roaring. Then comes the moment of alchemy. Just the right amount of tin, about 10% is added to the copper. Add too little, and the metal's still too soft. Add too much, and it becomes brittle. But get it just right, and you have something magical. A golden-hued metal that's hard, durable, and most importantly can be poured into mold. You watch as a second mold is filled, this time for a curved blade used to cut barley. There's a kind of reverence in the process, like baking bread or delivering a child. Each mold is handmade, each pour unique. Historians still debate whether early smelters fully understood the chemistry, or if they stumbled into it by sheer trial and error. Either way, once the technique spread, it transformed civilizations, and with transformation came hierarchy. In this city, metalworkers are held in high esteem. Not quite priests, but certainly not peasants. Their forges sit near temples, close to both divine favor and raw materials. You imagine one of them sipping date wine at a feast, bragging that he forged a blade for the king himself, cut through a boar like butter. He'd say, as someone passes him more lentil stew. You step outside and blink in the light. On the edge of the square, you see a bronze statue, a lion, regal and fierce. It gleams with an almost supernatural glow. Not just art, but warning. Bronze was power. After all, not everyone could afford it. Not everyone was allowed to have it. A merchant passes you, muttering to himself as he counts bronze ingots in a satchel, each shaped like an ox hide, flat and wide, meant for stacking and transport. They jangle like coins, but are worth far more. In some places, they serve as currency. And it's not just weapons or tools. Bronze is used in mirrors, musical instruments, even surgical scalpels. You hear the faint ping-ping of a stringed lyre somewhere nearby, a musician playing under a fig tree, her instrument strung with gut, the frame polished to a golden shine. As you wander, you notice the city has its own rhythm. Everyone plays a part: miners, merchants, smiths, scribes. Bronze makes it possible. And yet, it also marks the start of something else. Inequality. Not everyone has access to bronze. Not every village has a forge. Some places are still deep in the Stone Age, looking on as the bronze-rich cities grow taller, richer, and more aggressive. You cross a narrow bridge where a canal bubbles quietly beneath. Two fishermen pull up bronze-tipped spears, grinning at a slippery catch. A child drags a toy chariot, its wheels wobble, but they're made from real bronze shavings, scavenged from the forge's floor. In every detail, the metal is present, gleaming, humming, whispering of a new era. It is, quite literally, the edge of the future. You wake to the sound of sandals slapping sun-baked The city is already buzzing, and the day's barely begun. Roosters crow, donkeys bray. Someone's arguing about a shipment of barley. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes as you follow the scent of fresh bread and charcoal through narrow alleys into something remarkable. The earliest known cities. Not villages, not camps, cities. It starts with Uruk. Towering walls rise around humid brick. Yes, but sturdy, lined with defensive towers. Inside, the layout is surprisingly orderly. Streets intersect. Temples dominate the skyline. There's a central district where administrators scurry with tablets, a craftsman's quarter where tools clink and scrape, and wide courtyards where merchants shout prices over the din of livestock. You're in southern Mesopotamia, around 3000 BC, standing in one of the oldest urban centers known to history. This is where the whole idea of city begins, where people stop just surviving and start organizing. Historians still argue whether cities like Uruk were born out of necessity or ambition. Did they grow because of irrigation systems that required coordination? Or did temples grow first, drawing people like moths to divine flame? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. Once cities take root, they change everything. You wander past, scribes hunched under an awning, trading styluses and gossip. A woman beside them counts jars of sesame oil, her stylus tapping thoughtfully on a ledger. You peek over her shoulder. Yes, that's actual writing, not letters yet. These are cuneiform signs, wedge-shaped impressions in soft clay. At first, they're just but over time, they evolve into something closer to phonetic writing, a way to capture language, preserve it, manipulate it, and all this just to keep track of sheep everywhere. The city breathes structure. You pass a granary, its courtyard, filled with workers unloading sacks from carts. You can practically feel the bureaucracy in the air. Tallies, audits, arguments about whether the donkey's weight should count toward shipping fees. A small boy darts past with a wax tablet tucked under his arm, probably late for his lessons at the temple school. He shouts something cheeky to a girl selling figs. She rolls her eyes and throws a peel at him. Ah, young love and shunt edition. You reach the central temple complex. Cigarettes, not yet as tall as they'll become, but imposing nonetheless. Priests bustle about, offering incense and chanting softly to the gods. The temple is the beating heart of the city, both spiritually and economically. Offerings flow in from farms. Livestock is counted and redistributed. Even labor is tracked, a kind of divine timesheet. And above it all, administration. A man in crisp robes adjusts his hairpiece as he supervises the loading of grain into storage pits. Nearby, a clay tablet confirms the quotas. You overhear part of the conversation. He's worried about bandits on the trade route from Elam. The city, for all its walls and order, lives in constant tension with the wild. Beyond Uruk, there are others: Lagash, Kish, Lado, Babylon. Farther east, the Indus Valley cities rise with their own flavor: Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Gridded streets, advanced drainage systems, standardized brick sizes that suggest central planning on a scale modern urban developers would find impressive. You wade into the noise of a Harappan market. The city smells different here, drier, with spice in the air and sweet mango in clay pots. You sip cool, spiced water from a leaf-wrapped cup. People smile as they pass, wearing shell bangles, copper jewelry, and linen dyed in gentle hues. Strikingly, there's no central temple, no looming king. Historians still puzzle over this. Was Harappan society more egalitarian, decentralized? Or have we just not found the palace yet? Even farther west, the Minoans of Crete build palatial cities filled with light wells, colorful and plumbing advanced enough to make modern campers weep with envy. You wander through the palace of Knossos, marveling at dolphin murals and graceful staircases. No one here carries swords, not openly at least. The culture seems peaceful, feminine. Even goddess figurines with raised arms fill the corners of shrines. And yet, cities are not just peaceful centers of trade and craft. They're power structures. Pressure cookers, Each city needs food, labor, raw materials. Each must secure its borders, defend its goods. You overhear talk of raids from a neighboring settlement. Someone stole goats in the night. The response, a planned skirmish, perhaps a warning. Cities rise because they solve problems, water, trade, protection, but they also cause new ones. Crowding, disease, class divisions. You pass a man coughing beside a well and wonder if he's caught more than just dust. A woman closes her window shutters, wooden slats, painted red perhaps, to block the noise of a nearby quarrel over property lines. Still, in spite of all that, there's wonder. A musician strums a lyre as the sun sets over a canal. Children chase each other through alleys. A baker pulls golden loaves from a dome-shaped oven. You find a spot on a ledge and sit, watching the flicker of oil lamps blink on, one by one. The city may be imperfect, but it's alive. You're sitting now near a low wall, its edge warm from the sun. Across from you stands a temple, its columns painted in earthy reds and faded blues. The mud brick walls reinforced with wood, its steps worn smooth by countless feet and sandals. But you're not here to worship. You're here to watch something almost more powerful than the gods themselves. Accounting, the scribe's tunic dusted with flour and a streak of charcoal under his eye hunches over a clay tablet, carefully pressing neat little wedge shapes into it with a stylus. His assistant reads aloud from a list: 2 measures of barley, 4 goats, a half jar of olive oil. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats in protest. You've entered the glorious, paperless bureaucracy of the Bronze Age. Everything here runs on accounting. Temples are not just spiritual centers, they're banks, storage facilities, employment offices, and schools. You peek inside one chamber and find shelves stacked high with clay tablets, all labeled with the same obsessive care as modern filing cabinets. Need a loan? Go to the temple. Want to sell a plot of land? The temple will handle it. Need to record your enemy's unpaid debt from that business? With the chickens last spring, yup. Historians still argue whether temples ran the cities or merely supported them. Either way, without them, Bronze Age urban life would collapse faster than a poorly fired pot. You watch as a delivery cart arrives, a wooden sled pulled by oxen, with squeaky wheels and a driver shouting about the heat. The goods are inspected, recorded, and unloaded into a courtyard lined with enormous clay storage jars. These jars, some taller than a child, are sealed with stamped plugs and labeled with marks to show what's inside. Dates, grain, dried fish. A priest in a tall headdress strolls by, offering a perfunctory blessing to the goods. Maybe he's checking inventory. Maybe he's praying for no weevils. Maybe both. It's not just food that flows through the system. You notice rows of baskets filled with wool, spindles, and bolts of linen. These will be distributed as rations to workers, people building canals, cleaning temple courtyards, harvesting grain. Payment doesn't come in coins yet. Instead, wages are meted out in food, cloth, and birrias, the foamy, thick kind, sipped through straws from communal pots. You make a mental note to skip happy hour. Nearby, another scribe trains a student. The boy frowns at his tablet, tongue sticking out slightly as he tries to copy a complicated sign. The teacher claps him gently on the shoulder. Well done. The sign for sheep looks less like a puddle today. You admire the dedication. To become a scribe isn't easy. It's the closest thing this world has to a white-collar job. Years of training, countless signs to memorize, the ability to keep a straight face while writing about barley quotas for the 5th time that morning. And the scribes don't just track inventory. They write contracts, letters, diplomatic messages, marriage agreements, even poems. In dusty corners of this very building might lie copies of the Epic of Gilgamesh, scratched into clay, waiting to be read aloud at temple feasts or by lamplight. You overhear a transaction, a man trading a pig for 2 goats and a bundle of onions. The deal is sealed with a handshake, then promptly recorded by a nearby official. Everything has to be noted. The Bronze Age thrives on receipts. You walk into a side room where a young woman is wrapping a clay tablet in a second layer of clay. This, you realize, is security. The outer shell will bear the seal of a witness if it's tampered with. You'll know. The ancient version of an envelope or a password-protected PDF. Of course, bureaucracy isn't all cleanly managed grain and goat exchanges. You pass a grumbling farmer arguing with a tax collector over a miscounted harvest. The collector insists. The record is correct, see here. Right on the tablet, plain as day. The farmer replies with a phrase that probably translates to something like, "That's not what your assistant said last week." Bronze Age taxes were persistent. Every cow, every plot of land, every harvested sheaf was subject to assessment. Fail to pay, and you might lose your oxen, your grain, or worse, be conscripted for a month of canal digging. You wander into a courtyard, where a clay tablet lies shattered on the ground. Two guards are questioning a nervous-looking merchant. Someone probably tried to smuggle untaxed goods past the scribes. Even here, in a world of gods and myths, paperwork rules. And yet, despite the layers of clay and stamps and grain logs, something about it all feels familiar. You've stood in modern lines at the DMV. You've clicked through online tax forms. The more things change, as the sun begins to sink, you hear the temple bell, just a large, bronze gong, struck with a carved wooden mallet. Workers begin to wrap up. Scribes dust their tablets and pack them into reed baskets. A woman lights a torch. Smoke rises from the bread ovens nearby. You smile as a pair of tax officials compare numbers and sigh in unison. Ancient accountants, just as tired as the ones today. Evening rolls in like a warm sigh. The streets are still busy, but the pace is slowed. Shopkeepers sweep dust from threshold. A bronze bell chimes from a tower, announcing the supper hour. And suddenly, your stomach reminds you that even in 2200 BCE, people still had to figure out what's for dinner. You follow your nose. A family prepares their evening meal outside their modest home, really more of a mud brick cube with a flat roof, shared with a few goats and an opinionated cat, over a low fire. Something thick and savory bubbles in a clay pot. The mother stirs slowly with a carved wooden ladle while a child crushes garlic, using a smooth stone and a flat dish. Tonight's menu: lentils with onion, maybe a splash of sour goat's milk. You glance around and realize this scene is happening everywhere. The Bronze Age table might not have silverware, but it has variety. Emmer wheat, barley, chickpeas, onions, leeks, cucumbers, and dates sweet enough to make your teeth ache. For protein, there's fish plucked fresh from nearby canals or rivers. Meat is less common, reserved for festivals or wealthier households. When it is served, it might be roasted lamb, goat, or even gazelle, if you're lucky. And beer. Always beer. Thick, porridge-like brews flavored with herbs and stored in clay jars. You're offered a straw. It's the only way to avoid swallowing the floating chunks. Tastes earthy, refreshingly weird. In a wealthier home near the temple, dinner is more elaborate. Flatbreads baked in a tunda-style oven, stews of lentils and wild herbs, olive oil drizzled over roasted vegetables, honey-sweetened pastries shaped into small spirals, served on ceramic plates. And in some corners of the world, particularly in ancient Egypt, the feast becomes almost spiritual. You step into a nobleman's estate, where servants lay out food offerings for both the living and the dead. Roast, duck, figs, melons, dates, stuffed with nuts. You're not sure who as hungry are you, or the ghost of the guy buried beneath the floor. You linger beside the hearth, watching a cook wrap fish in lotus leaves before roasting them in the coals. The scent is intoxicating. Another servant grates garlic and coriander into a clay bowl, while a child sprinkles ground cumin with the studied intensity of a junior priest. Historians still debate just how widespread some of these foods were. Did every household get garlic and oil, or were such luxuries reserved for elites? Archaeological evidence varies. Some sites show rich diets, others simple grains and legumes. You wander out toward the edge of the city where farmers live in red huts raised above the floodplain. A woman there prepares dinner with remarkable efficiency, chopping onions with a bronze blade so well assused it is worn to a crescent. Her hands move like clockwork. The food may be humble, but the setting is breathtaking. Fields of barley waving in the evening breeze, a soft hum of insects, the croak of frogs echoing over irrigation canals. The connection to the land is constant. The fields, the river, the weather, they dictate the menu, the mood, and the risks. A failed harvest could mean famine. A good one might bring celebration, temple feasts, and festivals, involving enough beer to knock over as you pass a baker's stall still warm from the afternoon's fire. Loaves are round and flat, marked with thumbprints, often flavored with coriander or sesame. Some are set aside as temple offerings, stamped with seals, declaring them suitable for the gods, even the divine, like their carbs. Further along, in the Indus Valley, you stop to sample a different culinary palette. Grains, steamed in, leaf bundles, spiced lentil soup served in terracotta bowls, and perhaps the world's earliest hint of pickled meat. You can almost hear the subtle symphony of turmeric, mustard seed, and garlic drifting on the wind. In Minoan Crete, your culinary tour ends with olive oil drizzled over soft goat cheese, wild greens wrapped in flatbread, and a jug of surprisingly crisp wine. A woman offers you a fig, split open to reveal its rich, sticky interior. You take a bite. It's oddly perfect. It hits you, no matter where you go. Bronze Age people ate with care. Meals weren't rushed. They were rituals, gathered around a fire, or on a rooftop under the stars. Families passed food from hand to hand. Jokes were told, stories repeated. Food, even the simplest, was more than fuel. It was how people endured. As night deepens, you settle with a borrowed blanket and a full belly, listening to the quiet rhythm of a city slowly falling asleep. Somewhere nearby, a pot simmers its last, and the smell of roasted garlic still lingers on your fingers. Not bad for a civilization with no forks. You wake early the next morning to the soft sound of sandals slapping stone and the rustle of linen robes. Someone sweeps a courtyard nearby with a palm frond broom, and birds chirp from rooftop perches. The air is cooler now, pleasant before the sun scorches the clay streets again. You sit up, stretch your arms, and notice something strange by your bedroll. A wig made of human hair. Or is it wool? Maybe both. Welcome to Bronze Age fashion, where the line between practical and theatrical is pleasingly thin. You slip into the morning flow of people, observing the variety of outfits, accessories, and deeply expressive grooming choices. Some wear long linen robes, belted at the waist. Others wear kilts plaited, wrapped, or pleated. In the cities, the textiles are bleached white, dyed in indigo or saffron, sometimes even striped embroidery. Yes, sequins made of metal, occasionally. You pass one very proud-looking man in a leopard pattern wrap that may or may not be real. Wigs, though that's the idea. In ancient Egypt, wigs are the look. Hot climate, shave your head for hygiene. Social status, slap on a giant perfumed wig. Some are elaborate braids with beads. Others are curled and padded for height, like a meringue with political ambition. The more layered and fragrant, the more impressive. One woman's wig even has built-in gold pins shaped like lotus petals. Historians still argue how widespread wig-wearing was beyond elites, but in tomb paintings, it's everywhere. A noble's vanity table might include not just wigs, but perfumed cones, wax lumps worn atop the head that melt slowly, releasing oils to keep your hair soft and your scalp smelling like a well-fed priest. You run your hand through your own hair, which now feels disappointingly normal. As you wander through a bustling market, you notice someone selling cosmetics, crushed minerals in little ceramic pots, malachite for green eye paint, galena for kohl eyeliner. You're invited to try some. It tingles a little but gives you a smoky, mysterious look. You'll glance at your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. Not bad. In Mesopotamia, style leans more toward practicality but not without flair. Men wear ankle-length tunics with fringe along the edges, and women often wear layered dresses, belted and draped with heavy earrings and strings of beads. Children run barefoot, their heads shaved except for one long curl. A small girl stops to show you her necklace. 3 tiny shells and a bead shaped like a pomegranate. You tell her it's lovely, and the materials used say a lot. Cotton hasn't arrived in most places yet, but linen and wool dominate. Linen is for the rich fine, breathable, expensive to make. Wool is coarser, warmer, but more accessible. Some families weave it at home, combing and spinning the fibers before dyeing them in deep reds or muddy yellows. You spot a loom near a courtyard and pause to watch a woman deftly throw the shuttle back and forth. Clothing isn't just stylets. Symbolism. Priests wear special robes marked with embroidered patterned symbols of stars, bulls, or sacred trees. In the Hittite lands, kings donned tall, stiff headdresses during rituals. In the Indus Valley, figurines show women with elaborate headdresses, bangles stacked nearly to the elbow, and long braided hair decorated with little rosettes or beads. Footwear, optional. Most people go barefoot, unless they're traveling far or trying to show off. Sandals made from leather or woven papyrus are common. One merchant flashes a sandal with a carved sole so when he walks, the imprint left in the dirt spells out his name. You wonder how many ancient breakups ended with someone stomping off in name-stamped footwear. You pause at a stall selling jewelry, bronze rings, copper bangles, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian from India. The stall owner offers you a deal on a faience amulet, shaped like an eye warren, to ward off curses. You buy it, naturally. Fragrances everywhere. Scented oil myrrh, cinnamon, frankincense fill the air. Even poor households use herbs to mask body odor. A merchant dribbles a drop of jasmine oil onto your wrist, and for a moment, the whole world smells like a blooming garden. You pass through a ceremonial district just in time to see a wedding procession. The bride wears a gold-colored shawl over a richly dyed robe, her eyes lined with kohl, her arms jingling with bangles. People toss flower, petals real, some made of dyed linen. A priest blesses the union with a string of incantations. A little boy, perhaps her brother, trails behind holding the family's finest bronze bowl, like its treasure. You step back into the crowd, marveling at how much thought and flair Bronze Age people put into how they presented themselves. For a world with no mass production, no buttons, and no concept of fast fashion, they did just fine. And yes, some of them wore eyeliner better than you ever will. The midday sun hangs high, casting golden light over temple roofs and market stalls. You drift away from the noise of commerce and celebration, following a procession of white-robed figures, walking slowly toward a tall, stepped platform. A priest at the front carries a bronze censer, sending thin spirals of smoke into the sky. The others chant softly, and as you join them, you realize something else hums beneath the surface of Bronze Age life. Ritual. Everything from building a house, to planting seeds, to deciding whether to travel. Tomorrow requires divine consultation. In a courtyard, near the ziggurat, you find a priestess standing over a freshly sacrificed sheep. Her face is serene, focused. The liver of the animal has been carefully removed, washed, and laid on a polished slab. She points to certain curves and discolorations, murmuring to her apprentice. You step closer and watch as she reads the organ like a map. You, my friend, have just witnessed extaspecia art of divination by ent. Historians still argue whether these rituals were believed to reveal real divine messages or were more like carefully staged political theater. But the practice was widespread. Clay models of livers have been found covered with labels and teaching marks like a professor's annotated PowerPoint, but with more blood. Elsewhere in the region, a Babylonian priest scribbles on a tablet, interpreting a recent lunar eclipse. That's a bad sign. The king might need to perform a cleansing ritual, or maybe designate a fake king for a week. someone expendable to absorb the bad luck. You hope that's not your job. You drift through temples that smell of incense, milk, and ancient stone. Offerings are piled high. Bread loaves, jugs of beer, baskets of fruit, and slabs of meat. Not all will be consumed. Some are symbolic. Others redistributed to temple staff, which is a polite way of saying the gods probably don't need that extra lamb leg, so the priests will eat it. The gods are everywhere. In Mesopotamia, they have departments. Enlil controls the wind. Inanna rules love and war. Shamash handles justice, and so on. You'd think they'd be more coordinated, but the myths suggest otherwise. Many of the gods are tempestuous, moody, and prone to arguing like divas at a royal banquet. You sit beside a carved relief showing a god handing over a measuring rod to a king. That's authority granted from above, divine legitimacy baked right into the bricks of civilization. The king isn't just a man, he's a middle manager for the heaven. In Egypt, things get even more structured. Pharaoh is not just chosen by the gods. He is a god, living, ruling, strutting in gold sandals, and occasionally reminding everyone of his divine lineage with a pyramid-sized monument. You pass a group of scribes carving hieroglyphs into limestone, capturing the pharaoh's latest victory and his donation of 300 oxen to a temple. Rituals shape every aspect of life. Before a merchant leaves on a journey, he consults a priest. Should he go today? Tomorrow? He waits to see how the sacred oil moves in water. If it spreads clockwise, good omen. If it clots, cancel the camel. A woman preparing for childbirth receives a blessing from a household goddess, figurine likely made of clay, her hips wide, her arms raised, her expression half stern, half sleepy. Amulets are placed under the bed. A lullaby is hummed to the unborn child, gently reminding them not to be too dramatic about the process. Even in the Indus Valley, where we know less about specific deities, there are hints of similar spiritual rhythms. Seals show horned gods, meditating figures, and sacred animals. Tiny clay figurines are found in household shrines. Goddess figures with exaggerated features, possibly fertility charms. You duck into a festival. A group of dancers wearing painted masks and bronze bells performs around a sacred tree. Drums beat, feet stomp, and a boy in a lion costume roars dramatically before tripping over his tail. Laughter erupts. Even in reverence, there's room for joy. You're handed a drink, fermented barley, slightly sour, served in a ceramic cup with a painted rim. A woman nearby tells you this celebration is for the harvest moon. The gods like happy people, she says, grinning, and loud drums. It's not all grand ceremony. Most people carry a personal ritual with them. Little household statues, prayers whispered before meals, charms to ward off misfortune. A man shows you his necklace, a tiny bronze fish, for good dreams, he explains, and to keep snakes away. You don't ask how often those two problems intersect. As dusk settles, you walk back through the temple district. The altars flicker with low flames, the incense thinning like a memory. The priests have retired. The last offerings are being stored. In the sky, stars begin to immer signs, omens, gods, all suspended in the silence. Somewhere, a scribe is preparing to chart them, hoping they reveal what kind of day tomorrow might bring. You take one last look at the temple before slipping away. The gods are watching, but they're also, somehow, part of you, now etched into your sleep like symbols in soft clay. You wake to the sound of a lyre strumming nearby. Each note delicate as a falling leaf. Around you, a small crowd gathers in a courtyard lit by flickering oil lamps. You've stumbled into an evening storytelling session, and the bard, half priest, half buff. You settle into the dust, the warmth of the fire licking your toes, and prepare for something far grander than your usual bedtime story. The Bronze Age didn't just bring metal, it gave rise to mythologies so rich they echo into the present day. The bard speaks of Gilgamesh, king of Ur, said to be 2/3 divine and 1/3 man. He builds mighty walls, slays monsters, and seeks immortality after the death of his best friend, Enkidu, wild man shaped from clay and tamed by a woman in beer. You can't help but admire the Bronze Age priorities. You listen as Gilgamesh wanders through mountains and dark tunnels, finally meeting Utnapishtim, the man who survived the Great Flood. The flood story sounds suspiciously familiar. Historians still argue whether the Epic of Gilgamesh influenced later myths, like Noah's Ark, or if these flood tales emerged independently from shared human fears of water and wrath. The storyteller pauses to sip some date wine, then continues. His voice drops, and the crowd leans in. Now it's time for Inanna, queen of heaven and goddess of love, war, and what might politely be called chaotic energy. You follow her into the underworld, where she demands entrance, wearing 7 layers of royal regalia, removing one at each gate, until she stands naked before her sister, Ereshkigal, goddess of death. She's executed on the spot, of course, because that's what little sisters do when you barge into their dark kingdom uninvited. But Inanna doesn't stay dead. She rises again, possibly inventing dramatic comebacks long before soap operas existed. The myths of the Bronze Age aren't neat moral tales. They're wild, raw, and a bit petty. Gods get jealous. They throw storms. They sleep around. They turn mortals into animals or trees, out of spite or affectionate-ness. Often hard to tell which. You step away from the courtyard and into the sands of Egypt. A temple scribe invites you to sit beside him as he recites the contendings of Horus and Set. The gods are fighting over who should inherit the throne after Osiris's murder. Horus, son of Osiris, must prove himself through contests of strength, cunning, and patience. At one point, Set transforms into a hippo. Horus hurls a harpoon. Another time, there's a boat race where Set cheats by painting wood to look like stone. You wonder if this is meant to teach virtue, or if it's just ancient slapstick. Elsewhere, in Anatolia, Hittite myths tell of a storm god who forgets to fight the dragon. He loses his eyes and heart, then sends his son to marry the dragon's daughter in order to steal them back. Bronze Age gods don't always win gracefully. They lie, they fail, and sometimes they have to be bailed out by their own offspring. Do you find a carved tablet covered in cuneiform? A young apprentice is reading it aloud, an Akkadian tale of Adapa, the first man, who was given wisdom but denied immortality after refusing the gods food and drink. There's a strange echo here, almost like the Eden story, but with more bureaucracy. Back in the Indus Valley, things are we haven't found clear mythological texts, but seals and figurines suggest gods with animal heads, tree spirits, and proto-Shiva-like figures in meditative poses. One seal shows a man surrounded by beast tiger, elephant, buffalo, deer. Is he ruling them, praying? Historians still debate the meanings, since the Indus script remains under their myths, may be locked in those tiny marks forever. And yet, even without words, the imagery sings. You follow a merchant caravan by moonlight. At the campfire, someone begins telling a story from home. A man once angered a river goddess. To appease her, he built a shrine with silver peacock feathers. Now, whenever the wind shakes the trees, people say it's the goddess, laughing. These aren't just entertainment, they're memory. Myth binds people together. It explains the thunder. It warns you not to plant on a blood moon. It comforts you when your crops fail or a child is sick. The gods aren't distant, they're nosy neighbors with cosmic powers. You pass a group of children in Assyria chanting a tale song while playing with clay dolls. One of the dolls has wings, another has enormous ears. That's the listening god, a girl says proudly. He hears when you steal figs. You slowly put your half-eaten fig back in your pocket. At another fire, you hear the story of a bull so large it leaves lakes in its footprints. A girl falls in love with it. That's all you catch before the storyteller shifts into another tale. Something about a clever goat who solves a riddle and marries the moon's daughter. Bronze Age myths don't always follow logic, but they shimmer with feeling, with echoes of rain and fire, loss and laughter. Their stories born from starlight and the low murmur of river reeds. You find yourself caught in them, not just as a listener, but as someone being slowly folded into the tapestry. And just before sleep claims you, the bard from earlier returns to finish his tale. Gilgamesh, after all his battles and wisdom quests, finds that immortality. Isn't a magic plant or divine favorite in the walls of the city he built? The stories people will tell, like this one. Like now, you wake in a haze of salty air and wood smoke. The dawn sky glows pale rose over a bustling Bronze Age harbor. Ropes creak, bronze-tipped oars slap rhythmically against the surf. You're aboard a merchant ship, and someone's just handed you a lump of raw tin. Guard it with your life. The sailor says, only it's worth more than gold where we're headed. The Bronze Age wasn't just about kingdoms, and gods, it was also about trade. And not just local village swaps. We're talking thousands of miles of bustling, interconnected networks stretching from Mesopotamia to Mycenae, from Egypt to the Indus Valley. It's not globalization as we know it, but it's closer than you might think. Your vessel is a modest, flat-bottomed cargo ship, barely seaworthy by modern standards, but a marvel of its time. It's packed with copper ingots, amphorae of wine, animal hides, glass beads, and wooden crates rattling with dried figs. No GPS, no compasses, just the stars, seabirds, and a lot of yelling in multiple languages. Your captain, a sun-scorched Canaanite with missing teeth, tells you you're heading to Ugarit, a port city famous for its scribes and spices, but there will be stops. Cyprus for copper, Byblos for cedar, maybe even Crete if the wind favors you. You pass a Minoan ship going the other way, its sails stitched with red dolphin. Trade in the Bronze Age was as much about storytelling as it was goods. You learn to recite your cargo's origin like a bard. This lapis, from Badakhshan, far east of the mountains. These spices, caravaned up from Punt, past lions and you overhear heated arguments about Mesopotamian textiles, prized by Egyptian nobles, and Mycenaean swords, forged for kings, and exported like hotcakes. Even ostrich eggshells are considered a luxury item. Bronze Age tastes are eclectic, to say the least. Historians still argue whether these vast trade networks were controlled by state-run bureaucracies or enterprising merchants, some of whom may have been little more than glorified pirates. You begin to suspect your captain leans toward the latter. Suddenly, the deck erupts in shouts. On the horizon, another fleet. Unfamiliar sails cutting through the mist. Your crewmates grow tense. These aren't regular merchants. Whispers start. See, peoples, you've heard the rumors. No one knows exactly who they are. Perhaps displaced warriors from the Aegean, maybe migrants fleeing famine, or just the Bronze Age's version of those guys again. They raid ports, burn cities, topple empires. They arrive like storms, then vanish. Egyptian inscriptions call them foreigners from the islands. Their origin remains one of the era's great mysteries. Today, though, the fleet veers off. Crisis averted, but the captain insists you sleep near the cargo tonight. As you dock at a port in Anatolia, you're struck by the noise. 10 languages at once. Scribes recording transactions on clay tablets. Traders waving armfuls of carnelian and shell bracelets. You hear someone shouting about a shipment of tin gone missing, a serious issue when tin is rarer than good manners in a royal court. A Hittite official demands taxes. You hand over the small ingots. He grunts approval and stamps your manifest with a seal in the shape of a lion. You spend the night at a caravanserai just outside the city walls. Merchants from distant lands swap tailies over bitter beer. A Babylonian insists he saw a camel with golden hooves. An Egyptian retorts that once, while sailing the Red Sea, he met a fish that spoke in Akkadian. You smile into your lentil stew. The world feels connected by both truth and tall tailies. Before sleep, a young trader shows you a clay envelope, still sealed, with a cuneiform contract tucked inside. He says it's for a bride price arrangement. I haven't met her, he shrugs, but her family's reputation is worth 10 sheep. You nod, not quite sure what to say. Bronze Age logistics apparently extend to marriage. In the morning, you travel inland along one of the great caravan routes. The sun bakes the earth beneath your sandals. Ahead lies a line of camels carrying incense, their breath steaming in the cool dawn. You pass through an oasis trading post. There's a shrine where merchants pray for safe passage, and a graffiti wall where someone has carved what might be the earliest version of Kilroy was here. The scent of frankincense lingers in your hair for hours. Trade wasn't just about shiny things. It also transmitted ideas. You see scribes learning Egyptian hieroglyphs alongside cuneiform. You hear local priests adjusting rituals to include foreign deities just in case. There's a hybrid god in one town that's half bull, half falcon, and fully confusing. Even cooking methods travel. Someone gifts you a recipe: barley stew with onions, coriander, and a splash of date syrup. A hit in Elam, apparently. But not all exchanges are welcome. You stumble upon a ruined outpost, charred timbers, scattered amphorae, footprints hardened into ash. The Sea Peoples, bandits, a political feud gone too far. No one knows for sure. You find a child's toy near the Rabula clay horse, missing its legs. The road continues. You meet a woman from the Levant who's become a cult priestess in Egypt. A metalworker from Mycenae, now living in Syria. People are always moving, always adapting, and so are you. At last, you arrive at your destination, a city of stone walls and bronze gates. You unload your cargo. The tin is inspected, weighed, and whisked away by a scribe with an ink-stained beard. He nods, satisfied. You're paid in ingots, wine, and a tiny carved lion for luck, they say. That night, lying under stars strange to you, you realize something. The Bronze Age wasn't small. It spanned mountains, seas, and desert trails. It hummed, with the quiet rhythm of goods exchanged and names whispered in new tongues. You were part of that rhythm, now one beat in a long, shimmering chain of trade. Your journey continues, this time by foot. You leave the port behind and begin traveling inland, following one of the ancient caravan routes, snaking its way across the foothills of the Taurus Mountains. You're loaded down with a pack of trade goods, mostly small items now. Incense, beads, a few copper trinkets, and your feet ache in sandals that were never designed for long-distance hikes. Welcome to the Bronze Age traveler's life. No fancy wheels or smooth road, just us, time, and the occasional donkey. The road is never quiet for long. You pass farmers moving barley to market, priests on pilgrimage, and nomads driving herds. Even the animals are noisy. Bleating goats, barking dogs, and camels making a sound that can only be described as prehistoric trombone. Somewhere, someone is always selling something. Somewhere else, someone is always bartering for more. Your destination, a modest but prosperous hilltop town that serves as a central hub for regional trade. It's the kind of place where grain, beer, and gossip all flow in equal measure. By now, your clothes are dusty, your skin smells like travel, and your legs feel like carved stone. But the moment you see the zigzag walls of the town rise over the next ridge, you forget the pain. Inside the gates, the mood is festive. It's market day, and you've arrived just in time. Booths overflow with ceramic vessels, metal tools, colorful textiles, and oddly enough dried fish from the coast. Someone's playing a lyre. Children dart between legs, chasing a wooden hoop with sticks. You set up your stall beside an old man who's selling amulets shaped like frogs, supposedly for fertility. He eyes your goods skeptically. "Copper's good," he mutters, "but your beads are too modern. People here like the old stuff." It's one of those moments where you realize fashion existed long before Paris. You spend the afternoon listening and learning. A woman tells you about a local goddess who rides a lion and loves sesame oil offerings. A traveler boasts of visiting a floating city made entirely of reeds on a lake far to the east. A potter carves her mark into the bottom of every jar branding, long before marketing executives ever existed. You watch a boy carefully tie clay tokens into a net bag and hand it to a scribe. The tokens represent goods, a sort of prehistoric receipt. The scribe nods and pulls out a clay tablet, etching the transaction with a stylus. Historians still argue whether these tokens directly inspired the invention of writing, or if they were a separate system that eventually merged with proto-cuneiform. Either way, it's bureaucracy at its most charming. In the evening, a local family invites you to stay in their home, really. Just a room with woven mats and a fire pit in the center. You're offered barley bread, soft cheese, and lentil soup. You try not to ask what kind of animal the cheese came from. Probably goat. Hopefully goat. You sit near the hearth while your hosts chatter about omens. The liver of yesterday's sacrificial sheep had a strange creasum think. It means the rains will come early. You nod politely, though you're not entirely sure how sheep livers work as meteorology tools. Before bed, you walk outside and gaze at the stars. Orion is clear above, and someone points to a bright planet, Ishtar's eye. They whisper. You remember that sailors, merchants, and kings all looked up at these same stars, all trying to navigate their lives by light and luck. Back inside, the fire burns low. Someone snores softly. You wrap yourself in a rough wool blanket and feel the dust of the day settle into your bones. Outside, a dog barks, somewhere far off. A donkey brays into the night like it's auditioning for an ancient choir. In the morning, it's time to move on again. This time, you join a group of herders heading across the steppe. They're driving sheep and goats, and they let you walk with them. As long as you help keep the animals from eating everything in sight, it's peaceful, in a repetitive sort of way. You chat with a boy who never left this region but knows more about cloud patterns and wolf tracks than you could ever imagine. At night, you camp under the open sky. Someone passes around a clay bottle of fermented honey wine. You take a sip and immediately cough. It tastes like flowers and feet. Still, you manage a polite. They nod, pleased. The herders tell stories about cave spirits, shape-shifting foxes, and a man who lived for 200 years because he only ate onion. You're starting to wonder how many Bronze Age jokes were just nutritional myths. The next few days blur into one another. You cross wide plains, dry riverbeds, and hills dotted with dome and strange, upright stones, like mini Stonehenges. Historians still argue whether these were tombs, shrines, or something more symbolic. You pass one with carvings of spirals and deer, half faded but still mysterious. Eventually, you reach the edge of a royal territory. The herders wave you off and head north. You join a group of pilgrims traveling to a temple more, walking more dusty sandals, more curious conversations. At the town gates, soldiers ask where you're from. You stammer something about tin and trade, and they wave you through. This town is different. Bigger, louder. You feel small again, like you did back on the ship, but also more confident. You've walked the Bronze Age, felt its dust, tasted its cheese, followed its stars. You're not just visiting history, you're living it. You drop your pack at a way station and look around. Somewhere, a priest is chanting. Somewhere else, a child is chasing a chicken. It's just another day in the Bronze Age, and tomorrow it will continue. You wake to the sound of drums, not thunder, not hooves drums, rhythmic and insistent. You blink against the morning sun and realize something different is in the air. Not trade, not farming. This town has the hum of war about it. You follow the sound to the edge of the main square, where a crowd has gathered to watch a militia drill. Young men practice formations with spears and wooden shields, glancing nervously at a scar-faced veteran who yells at them to keep their lines straight. A small boy pretends to be a commander, barking gibberish orders at his dog. The dog, in a rare show of cooperation, actually sits. This is your first real glimpse of Bronze Age warfare, and you quickly learn it's less about epic battles and more about mud, logistics, and sore feet. Sure, chariots exist, though sleek, two-wheeled symbols of power and speed, but they're rare, expensive, and mostly reserved for kings, generals, or guys who like to make dramatic entrances. Most soldiers are more like you, on foot, hungry, and hoping to avoid being first in the line. A craftsman lets you inspect a bronze-tipped spear. It's surprisingly light, polished to a dull gleam. He explains that the wooden shaft matters more than the metal point. Bad wood means broken weapons. You nod wisely, pretending you've always known this. A mural on a nearby wall catches your eye. It's faded, but vivid. Chariots in motion, horses mid-gallop, warriors with bows drawn. The figures are stiff, two-dimensional, but somehow full of action. It's propaganda. Really, a story carved in lime plaster to say, our king wins battles and feeds the gods. You spend the day exploring the edges of martial life. In a back alley, you find a bronze helmet half covered in dirt. A child claims it's cursed. You brush it off and try it on immediately, regretting it. It's heavy. It smells like 1,000 foreheads, and it doesn't match your outfit. Still, you keep it on for a bit, just to feel heroic. You follow a group of soldiers heading to the outskirts of town, where an open field has been marked with stakes and ropes for mock combat. It's a training day, and you're allowed to watch from a safe distance. The formations are loose, the commands shouted in a mix of languages, and there's a lot of sweating, but you can see the discipline trying to form. You learn about the shield wall, the staggered line, and why it's never a good idea to charge uphill, especially when the other guy has slings. Speaking of slings, a boy shows you his, a simple leather strip with a pouch. He picks up a smooth stone, spins it, and lets it fly. It hits a tree with a loud thwack. You try and hit yourself in the shin. You pretend it didn't hurt. Slings are cheap, deadly, and surprisingly effective. Historians still argue whether entire armies used them en masse or just in skirmishes, but there's no doubt they were feared. That small stone, it can break bone at 100 yards if aimed right. Later, you re-invited to a meal with some lower-ranking soldiers, basically farmers, who've even called up for service. Over onion stew and barley cakes, they grumble about the food, the sandals, the lack of horses, and the new guy who keeps polishing his sword like it's a mirror. You realize the soldier complaints are timeless. Someone mentions a recent skirmish with a rival town, nothing major, just a few stolen goats and a bruised ego, but it was enough to spark a retaliatory raid, which then required a ceremonial response. And now here you are, watching half-trained teenagers try to look intimidating with spears. At dusk, you wander to the temple precinct, where warriors offer thanks for survival. You watch as one man, probably a commander, places a bronze dagger at the foot of a stone idol. Not the blade he fights with, but one made specifically for offering. It's finely cast, with a small inscription, possibly a name, possibly a wish. Nearby, a priest chants softly, sprinkling grain and beer onto a small fire. The smoke curls upward, slow and hypnotic. You sit and breathe it in. It smells like bread and ash, and something faintly floral. The gods, you think, must have very specific tastes. Before leaving the precinct, you notice a wall carved with tiny pictographs of battle record, showing waves of stick-figure men, weapons in hand, descending on an enemy fort. Some lie prone, presumably dead. Others raise their arms in triumph. You squint at one particular figure who appears to be upside down. Artistic error, or some obscure message. Historians still argue whether such images were literal representations, or meant as metaphors for cosmic balance. As night falls, the town is quiet again. Fires flicker behind shuttered windows. Dogs bark in the distance. Somewhere, someone tunes a lyre, plucking out a slow, uncertain melody. You lie back against a cool stone wall, feeling the helmet still balanced on your head like a weird paperweight. You think about war and peace, and how thin the line is between the two. You think about all the battles lost to time, all the forgotten soldiers who never had murals painted in their honor. And you think, strangely, about the boy with the sling. He'll probably never be remembered, but maybe, just maybe, he'll teach his child how to aim. And the story will live on in that simple act. You take off the helmet, place it beside you, and close your eyes. Tomorrow, you'll keep moving. The day begins with dust in your mouth and sun on your face. You're standing at the foot of something enormous. Towering above you in the haze is a ziggurat, a mountain of mud bricks stacked with unnerving precision. It looms like a stairway to the heavens, or at least to the neighborhood of the gods. You crane your neck to take in its layered levels, each tier smaller than the one beneath. Bright banners flap lazily from the summit. A priest in embroidered robes appears as a dot near the top, waving incense like a sleepy conductor. It's a lot. You barely had breakfast. Still, curiosity propels you forward. A worker waves you in. You follow a narrow path winding through a maze of scaffolding made from bundled reeds, wobbling slightly underfoot. Men and women carry baskets of wet clay balanced on their heads, trudging up temporary ramps in a rhythm as ancient as the sun. This is no pyramid, built from stone and silence. This is mud architecture at its finest. A living, breathing beast that needs constant patching, relayering, and love. The secret recipe: sun-dried bricks made from river clay, chopped straw, and maybe a touch of camel spit. Whatever the mix, it's working. This ziggurat has stood for generations. You pause to watch the process. One team molds fresh bricks and lays them out to bake in the sun. Another smears thick layers of bitumen between blocks, creating a waterproof seal. Bitumen smells like hot tar and old tree sap. It sticks to your sandals and your soul. A young girl offers you a flat tool and encourages you to try slathering mortars. You do. You miss. She giggles. You're better at watching history than building it. As you climb further, you notice that this isn't just a construction. Every worker pauses at the start of their shift to mutter a short prayer to Enlil, or Inanna, or some local god whose name changes with the dialect. There's no difference between labor and worship here. To stack mud is to serve. At the midpoint platform, you reach a shaded tent where supervisors rest. One offers you a lukewarm drink made from fermented date juice. It's sour, fizzy, and mildly alarming, but you pretend it's delightful. He explains that the ziggurat's purpose is layered. Just like its structure, it's not a tomb. It's not a temple. Exactly. It's a stage for heavenly performance, a cosmic ladder, a way for humans to say, "Hey gods, look what we did." Historians still argue whether these structures were ever meant to be climbed all the way to the top by regular folks. Some say it was only for priests. Others think festivals involve public processions, grand ascents, music, dancing, and a sacrificial goat or two. You continue upward. The air grows thinner, the breeze stronger. You can see the entire city from up here. Canals winding like snakes, roof gardens sprouting with barley, oxen plodding lazily past red fences. A boy flies a kite made from linen scraps, and for a moment you forget what century you're in. At last, you reach the summit. It's smaller than you expected, just a small shrine of polished stone, decorated with gold leaf and colored glass. The priest you saw earlier greets you with a knowing smile. He burns a pinch of incense and offers you a simple blessing. May your sandals never fail. You smile, bow, and sit on a sun-warmed step. From up here, everything feels distant and quiet. You understand now that the ziggurat isn't just a structure. It's a message, a prayer in brick and sweat. Each level whispers something: hope, fear, devotion, ambition. The priest points to a carved panel beside the shrine. It shows the god Enki emerging from the depths, bringing fresh water to the land. Beside him stands a human figure, possibly a king, possibly just a really optimistic engineer offering a bowl of barley. You trace the outline with your fingers. It's worn smooth by centuries of sun and touch. You wonder how many people have sat where you sit now. How many feet have scuffed this platform? How many stars they saw at night, away from the flicker of torches, high above the city dust. As the day fades, a group of musicians arrives, carrying small drums, lyres, and pen. They sit near the edge and begin to play. The music is soft, repetitive, hypnotic. It echoes down the staircases like a lullaby for the city below. You lean back, arms behind your head, and close your eyes. The last thing you hear is a priest murmuring something to the wind. Perhaps it's a thank you, perhaps a warning, or maybe he is just wondering how long it'll be before the bricks need patching again. The air is drier here, crisper, and it smells faintly of baked earth and something sweet, perhaps cardamom or some ancient cousin of cinnamon. You've traveled eastward across the great stretches of desert and mountain, and now you find yourself walking the broad, orderly streets of the city so ahead of its time it would put modern town planners to shame. Welcome to the Indus Valley civilization. Circa 2000 BCE, the city you're in is likely more, though it could just as easily be Harappa. Their layouts are so meticulously similar that archaeologists often have to double-check their trench maps. You trail your fingers along kill-fired red bricks, perfectly uniform in size. The streets are laid in a strict grid, intersecting at right angles. Sidewalks, drains, public wells, everything feels so intentional, so clean, that you begin to suspect this entire place was designed by someone with a deep love for both geometry and hygiene. A small child darts past you, barefoot, giggling as he splashes water from one of the many communal wells. You follow the sound of water down a side alley and discover something astonishing. An ancient toilet, complete with a sloped floor and a carefully bricked drainage channel. If you were hoping to rough it in the Bronze Age, sorry, these people had indoor plumbing before it was cool. You stop at a modest courtyard home. The door is open, and the woman inside welcomes you with a nod. You're offered a seat on a low platform shaded by woven reed screens. She serves you a drink chilled from a terracotta vessel pulled from the floor, an early version of a refrigerator. Thanks to evaporative cooling, your cup contains a herbal infusionment. Tamarind, maybe ginger. You sip slowly, grateful, as the late afternoon sun paints the rooftops gold. Here in the Indus Valley, there are no kings, no massive palaces, no grand not to say there's no hierarchy, someone's in charge of organizing the city. After all, but the evidence suggests that these were egalitarian, cooperative societies, focused more on clean water and fair trade than on building monuments to immortal egos. Historians still argue whether this absence of royal trappings means a lack of centralized power, or simply a different kind of governance, one not obsessed with statues and scribes. Either way, it feels peaceful here, purposeful. You stroll past shop stalls where merchants offer colorful beads, finely carved shell bangles, and small terracotta. One-figure woman with exaggerated hips and elaborate headdress reminds you of fertility goddesses found in far-off places. Perhaps the same beliefs echo across empires. Perhaps some stories travel better than others. You pause before a large building that stands apart. The Great Baths. It's a massive sunken tank, lined with baked bricks and sealed with wide steps lead down into it. And although it's dry now, you can imagine it filled with cool water, shimmering beneath the morning sun. This wasn't just for bathing, it was likely used for ritual cleansing, maybe even community gatherings. A moment of stillness in the rhythm of daily life. You take a seat on the warm stone edge and let your thoughts ripple outward like concentric circles. In a nearby workshop, artisans shape tiny seal square stamps carved with exquisite animal figures and mysterious symbols. You hold one up to the light and admire the tiny unicorn etched into its surface. What did it mean? Was it a name? A spell? A brand for trade goods? We still don't know. The indescript, found on thousands of seals and pottery shards, remains It's a riddle wrapped in ceramic and pressed into time. Scholars have tried everything: frequency charts, multilingual comparisons, even AI. Nothing has cracked it. So you're left to guess. Do you imagine what kind of person designed these marks? What their language sounded like? Whether they whispered it softly to their children at bedtime, or shouted it across a market to hawk river fish? As the evening sets in, the city glows with soft firelight. Small oil lamps flicker in courtyards. You're invited to share a meal. Rice and lentils, spiced and served on leaf platters, alongside a flatbread that's smoky from a clay top. The food is warm, simple, and strangely familiar. Your host offers you a place to sleep on a raised platform, under a woven roof, with a woolen blanket dyed with indigo or madder root. You lie back and look through the slatted ceiling at the stars. There are no wars here, no roaring kings, no gold masks or screaming statues, just people living, trading, washing, building, carving, growing. You close your eyes and let the mystery of it wash over you. In this city of order and silence, the past speaks quietly, not through battles or poems, but through bricks and drain sand. A gentle reminder that sometimes the most advanced societies are the ones that don't shout. You wake slowly, wrapped in wool and silence, to the soft murmur of early city life. Somewhere, a clay pot clinks against stone. A child yawns. A donkey snorts and shakes dust from its ears. The Indus sun is just beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the straight-line streets in soft ochre and pale gold. You stretch, blink, and set off once again, this time, not toward palaces or priests, but into the surprisingly intricate, often overlooked world of everyday Bronze Age tools and comforts. Because while history loves a flashy chariot or cursed tomb, it's the toilet seats, plows, and toothpicks that really tell you what it felt like to live back then. You pass a small toolmaker's stall, where a man is sharpening a bronze sickle blade. The curve of the tool fits perfectly in the palm, its edge surprisingly keen. Across from him, a potter rotates a wheel with their foot-tan elegant motion that sends a lump of clay spiraling into a symmetrical bowl. The smell of wet earth and smoke blends with morning bread baking somewhere nearby. Bronze gets all the glory, but wood and bone do most of the daily heavy lifting. You see spoons carved from animal ribs, spatulas shaped from driftwood, and a particularly clever pair of tweezers made of flattened copper. One trader shows you a compact little tooth cleaning stick, made from frayed neam wadan, ancient toothbrush, still used in parts of South Asia today. Need a haircut? You could swing by the barber's. He's holding a razor blade made of obsidian volcanic glass, sharper than steel. Next door, a young boy is balancing on a plank of wood pulled by oxen, furrowing the field with an early scratch plow. Not fast, but steady. The same principle that would fuel agriculture for millennia. One woman invites you into her weaving hut, where vertical looms lean against a wall. Her fingers move deftly over threads dyed in natural colors: crimson from madder root, golden from turmeric, and black from iron-rich mud. You run your hand over the cloth. It's surprisingly soft. Historians still argue whether the Bronze Age saw the true birth of domestic innovation, or whether earlier Neolithic societies quietly laid the groundwork. What's clear is that the tools of home life became increasingly specialized. Bronze awls for piercing leather, fish hooks, grain grinders, weights and measures, even early measuring rods, which may have been the distant cousins of your modern ruler. And then there are the toys. You smile as you spot a little girl dragging a clay cart on wheels, complete with carved oxen. Another child flicks a spinning top and lets out a giggle as it wobbles unevenly across a stone floor. Some toys even make music like a whistle, shaped like a bird, or a ceramic rattle filled with tiny pebbles. The past wasn't all solemn gods and temple rituals. Kids still wanted to play. Back outside, you pass a construction cruise. Even in 1800 BC, there were always walls to fix, bricks to lay, and drains to clear. The workers are forming bricks in standard molds, letting them sun-dry in neat rows before firing them. You help lift when it's heavy, but balanced, modular, efficient, and in true ancient multitasking. While one group works on drainage canals, another harvests reeds to craft baskets, sandals, and writing tools. The simplicity of it all is deceptive. These objects, though unglamorous, form the beating heart of civilization. Even the concept of personal grooming had its early flair. One man offers you a dab of scented oil from sesame or castor. You're not quite sure. Another woman applies kohl eyeliner with a bronze stick, narrowing her eyes With practiced precision, you peek inside a storage basket and find crushed mineral galena used, not just for decoration, but for ritual and maybe even insect repellent. You catch a whiff of perfume Rio, Bronze Age perfume. It's floral, but grounded in something deeper. Resins, perhaps myrrh, maybe even crocodile dung, which some Egyptian sources claim was used for sunscreen. You decide not to test that one personally. And then, at the edge of the settlement, you spot a cluster of beehive-shaped ovens and bread kiln. Women knead dough with rhythmic expertise, pressing it into hot stones or smearing it onto the inside of clay pots. The result, a crisp, chewy flat bread, rich with grainy texture and nutty flavor. You're handed a piece fresh from the fire, and it's so good you briefly forget you're 4,000 years from home. The sun climbs higher, and the smells, the sounds, the tactile details of daily life hum in the background. There's no concept here of modern convenience, because what they've built works. Water flows, grains grind, clothes get stitched, teeth get picked. You begin to see how civilization wasn't just a matter of laws and kings, but of humble tools and tiny comforts. A smooth ceramic cup, a polished stone mirror, a footpath paved in river pebbles to avoid mud in the rainy season. And as you sit again on a shaded stoop, finishing the last bite of your morning bread, you realize that progress often wears plain clothes. It's not always made of gold or inscribed in cuneiform. Sometimes it has just a perfectly weighted ladle or a pot with a spout that docent tea spill. And maybe that's what made the Bronze Age brilliant. Afternoon settles over the Bronze Age world like a soft woolen blanket, warm but heavy. The bustle slows, the air thickens. You find yourself wandering down a quiet side street toward a shaded courtyard filled with the quiet buzz of bees and the distant strum of a stringed instrument. Here, behind the walls and markets, the rhythm of life takes a gentler shape, held mostly in the hands of women, midwives, and mother goddess. You pause as a woman fans her infant with a palm frond, humming a lullaby, older than memory. The baby is swaddled in linen, resting in a basket cushioned with goat wool. Around them, 3 older girls grind grain while gossiping about last week's festival. Their laughter drifts like wind through reeds. Women in the Bronze Age weren't simply background figures. They were healers, weavers, priestesses, brewers, mothers, scribes, and sometimes rulers. In Sumer, some women even signed legal documents with seals of their own. One particularly bold Babylonian woman once sued her brother for unpaid rent. A real icon, but status varied wildly by region and rank. In some cities, elite women wore gold hair rings and performed rituals in temple courtyards. In others, they worked from dawn to dusk, tending crops and children with equal care. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age gender roles were strictly enforced or more flexible than once believed. But evidence shows a complex picture. Take childbirth. You're invited quietly into the home of a midwife or respected, if slightly feared, member of the community. Her toolkit sits in a woven basket. Linen cloths, date wine, tiny carved amulets, and herbal satchels. She'll chant a prayer to Gula, the healing goddess, as a laboring woman grips a clay idol for strength. There's no epidural, of course, but there is knowledge passed from woman to woman for generations. A decoction of willow bark, compresses of fig leaf, pressure points known only to those who've delivered 50 babies by It's ancient, messy, and deeply human. Outside, you pass a mural depicting a curiously powerful female lion taming and crowned with stars. She might be Inanna, or Ishtar, or some other mother goddess whose name has long faded. Her hands created both harvest and battle, fertility and destruction, creation and justice. You sit near a cluster of young girls learning to spin yarn. One boasts that her sister works in the palace kitchen, an honored position, since food is sacred. Another says her aunt brews beer for the temple. Brewing, you learn, was largely a female domain. Some beer recipes were even written down on clay tablets, making them among the oldest recorded cookbooks. And love. You ask one of the elders about marriage. She smiles wryly and hands you a scrap of old poetry. Roughly translated, "My beloved is sweet like dates, his arms strong like cedar beams. May Inanna guide him to my door before the barley cools." Romantic, yes, but also pragmatic. Marriages were often arranged, and dowries could include goats, linen, and even entire vineyards. Still, some letters suggest affection. Others reveal divorces written into contracts. One even lists an acceptable cause as bad hygiene. That tracks. Further along, you find a shrine tucked into the wall of a modest home. Inside is a small clay figurine of a curvy goddess, flanked by 2 doves. Offerings sit below. Honey, bits of bread, a polished shell. These weren't state-sponsored temples. They were personal, domestic altars, hinting at deeply felt beliefs passed down through generations of mothers and daughters. But not all was peaceful. You learn of women taken as war captives, sold into distant lands, their names lost, of priestesses cast out for defying palace edicts, of girls promised in marriage before their voices had deepened. Power and vulnerability often lived side by side, and yet, here in the slower moments, by the looms, the whispers exchanged between herbalists and storytellers, you see an invisible network of resilience. Bronze Age women built more than just families. They sustained economies, recorded histories, and kept entire communities running. You sip a warm herbal drink as the sun starts to droop. It tastes like chamomile and dried fig. A group nearby begins softly singing a harvest song. One woman taps her foot to keep rhythm while carding wool with quick flicks of her wrist. And just as the melody settles into the evening air, the light fades gently now, casting a honeyed glow across the courtyard. You lean back, eyelids heavier than you'd expected, lulled by the scent of drying herbs and freshly baked bread cooling under a reed basket. Somewhere, a lyre strums a drowsy chord. The wind, soft and slow, rustles through the date palms. A pair of doves coo in the eaves, and a cat stretches luxuriously on a sun-warmed stone ledge. You watch its tail flick in slow motion, like it knows it's the last moment of wakefulness. You remember, the stories linger in the air of goddesses and weavers, of lullabies and quiet triumphs. You imagine yourself wrapped in a linen cloak, a soft mat beneath you, gazing at the stars through an open roof. No buzzing devices, no traffic, just the hush of the past, holding you gently in its arms. Sleep begins to press at the corners of your mind. Even the distant marketplace seems hushed now. A baby murmurs in its sleep. A lullaby continues softly in the next room. And you let go. Let the scent of sandalwood and sesame oil ease you deeper. Let the memory of ancient hands weaving wool and shaping clay guide your breath. You are safe here, in the stillness of history. You don't need to understand it all. Just rest. You've wandered far tonight. Now, let the Bronze Age watch over you. Your eyes open to the faint glow of pre-dawn, and you're already moving. In the Bronze Age, no one waits for alarm clocks. A morning shows the sun itself is the boss. You roll off your straw mat, feet hitting packed earth, and the air still holds the night's coolness. Today, you're apprenticing in an art older than writing. You shuffle toward the smithy, where the forge breathes like a sleeping bull. Orange embers pulse in the dark, and the master smith is already awake, sorting out tools, bellows, tongs, a crucible, a clay mold shaped like a dagger. There's no room here for clumsiness. Every step is measured, rhythmic, deliberate because metal doesn't forgive. Bronze is the star of the age. Of course, that glamorous blend of copper and tin, smelted with care, hammered with pride, and poured into molds. With fingers crossed and brow sweaty, you might think that's straightforward, but the process feels almost magical, and in many ways, it is. You start with ore, usually dug from hillsides, or riverbeds with stone tools. The copper shines green and blue in the morning light, but it won't dazzle anyone until it's freed from the rock. The tin is rare, often traded over long distances, sometimes from as far away as what's now Afghanistan or Cornwall. People moved mountains just to get a few chunks. Your job today is to work the bellows. You press down with your foot, over and over, feeding air into the fire until it roars like a desert wind. Sparks leap and dance. The crucible glows. The master smith hums a tune, probably the Bronze Age equivalent of Eye of the Tiger. Finally, the molten bronze is ready. It's poured into the dagger mold in a single, careful motion. It hisses, settles, and begins to cool. You watch it, hypnotized, as metal becomes memory. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age smiths were seen as mere laborers or something more, mystical alchemists of the early world, forging weapons and status from rock and flame. In some cultures, they were even thought to have divine connections or secret knowledge passed down through generations. As the blade cools, you explore the smithy walls. There are clay molds shaped like axes, fish hooks, decorative pins, and crescent-shaped sickles. These aren't just tools, they're symbols of power and identity. One miscast, and you lose both form and function. A perfectly shaped axe, however, might earn you a place in the palace stores or the grave goods of a warrior lord. You run your finger along a finished dagger's edge. It's not razor sharp by modern standards, but the craftsmanship is unmistakable. Balanced, weighted, elegant. Bronze might not outmatch iron in strength, but it has a kind of golden confidence that endures. The blacksmith hands you a ring, not to wear, but to admire. A simple copper spiral, cast from a leftover lump of scrap. Mistakes become gifts, he mutters, before returning to his tools. Later, you wander outside, where a trader is inspecting finished weapons and tools. She's from another city, maybe another kingdom, wearing a necklace of blue lapis and speaking a dialect that's only half familiar. But the transaction is clear. 3 bronze sickles in exchange for a sack of olive oil and a jar of crushed malachite pigment. You realize then, metal isn't just for war or farming, it's currency, diplomacy, even fashion. The sparkle of a hairpin, the weight of a ceremonial blade, the clink of rings exchanged in marriage, all of it shaped by fire, by hands like yours, calloused and careful. As the forge cools and the sun begins to climb, you sit on a stone bench with a hunk of cheese and a fresh fig. You chew slowly, watching the smoke drift up and away, curling into the sky like the memory of all things forged. Behind you, the smith hums again. The fire still glows faintly, and you feel, deep in your bones, that the Bronze Age knows how to last. You stretch your arms and follow the breeze, wandering into the quieter edges of town. Today you're rejoining a group of women and a few scruffy kids heading toward a grove just outside the city. It's laundry day, but in the Bronze Age, laundry isn't just the path twists past tall reeds and a sluggish canal. Birds flutter overhead, squawking half-heartedly, and you can smell a mix of clay, sweat, and something vaguely floral. At the water's edge, wide flat stones are arranged like primitive workstations. The women settle in, laying out baskets of linen tunics, wool cloaks, and a mysterious pile of unraveled goat hair that may or may not become clothing again. You're handed a paddle more club than tool and shown how to slap wet fabric against the stones. It's oddly satisfying, like a drum solo for the dusk. The water darkens as the grime gives up the ghost, and suds foam lazily along the surface. The soap, not your citrus-scented modern bar. It's a mix of ashlie and crushed plant oils, maybe with a touch of chalk or animal fat. It smells earthy, committed. One woman jokes that if you can still smell your tunic after washing, you didn't wash hard enough. You take a break and wander upstream to refill a jug. Children are splashing in the shallows, laughing as they chase tiny freshwater crabs, daring one another to pinch a finger. A girl proudly shows you her treasure, a strand of bright blue glass beads she found lodged in the mud. Fallen from a princess, she declares, with absolute confidence, back at the stones. A different conversation is brewing. A few older women are boiling herbs and crushed flower petals in clay pots nearby. They're making scented rinse water, steeped with thyme, lavender, and something that smells like chamomile. This, they whisper, is the secret to impressing a. The rhythm of the morning settles in. Slap, rinse, ring chat. Gossip flows faster than the stream. Who's marrying whom? Who's late on grain taxes? Who saw a jackal near the grain store? One woman swears her cousin met a man who claimed to be part god, part merchant, but nobody buys it. Still, the stories are half the fun. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age communities had full-time professional washerfolk or whether it was a shared, seasonal ritual. There's evidence of dedicated washing sites, but also household pits lined with ceramic drainage tubes. Some even suggest festivals were timed around major communal, a chance to refresh both the body and spirit before the harvest or planting season. You glance up. A small clay tablet rests on a rock, left to dry in the sun. One of the women has inscribed it with tiny pictographs and inventory of garments. Returned to a temple storehouse. Each tunic accounted for. Each priest's robe recorded. You marvel at how mundane and sacred can blend so easily. Later, garments are hung across ropes, strung between fig trees, fluttering in the breeze like low-hanging prayer flags. The children play beneath them, pretending to be priests and palace guards. A boy wraps himself in a half-damp shawl and proclaims himself king. No one corrects him. As the sun climbs, shade becomes precious. A mat is unrolled. Someone brings out dates and you're handed a small lump of goat cheese wrapped in fig leaves. It's tangy and soft, and you try not to eat it too fast. Someone shares a cracked ceramic rattle, shaped like a hedgehog, and the children gather around as it squeaks and clicks. You lie back, watching clouds drift over the laundry flaps above, casting dancing shadows on your face. The laughter quiets. The rinse pots cool, and the scent of crushed thyme lingers in the air. You realize something. Even ancient chores carry beauty, if you let them. Even ash-laced, soap and wet wool can feel like ceremony. And as you drift half asleep beneath the laundry lines, one of the women chuckles. Next week, we scrub the temple mats. That's when the real dirt talks. You wake to the gentle rustle of linen and the scrape of sandals on gravel. Today you're walking alongside a trader, a wiry, sunburned man with laugh lines and a sandal strap always slightly undone. His donkey is piled high with goods, rolls of cloth, sealed amphary, a few carved wooden feet, and strapped carefully on top a small bronze mirror wrapped in goat leather. You're traveling a Bronze Age trade route, winding across dusty plains and low hills. The path is well-trodden, but far from smooth. Every few minutes you pass something left behind: a snapped chariot wheel, a rusted copper brooch, once even the skeleton of a broken sandal still trying to walk. The trader hums as you go. He tells you where each item came from. The cloth is from the Levant, dyed with crushed murex shell. The amphary carry Egyptian beer, flat and strange tasting but wildly popular. The wooden idols are from the mountain folk, carved during moon festivals you've never heard of. One even glows faintly from being polished with tree sap. Trade in the Bronze Age isn't just about goods, it's how cultures mingle, how myths spread, how languages borrow from one another. Historians still argue how structured these routes really were. Was there an official road between Ur and Hut, or were they just a web of informal trails passed down by word of mouth and boot print? At one stop, you encounter a small encampment, part caravan, part village. A family of herders sits by a smoky fire, offering dried apricots and slightly overcooked goat. They trade stories more eagerly than goods, swapping news from across the region. A girl shows you a clay tablet bearing a seal from a distant kingdom. She doesn't know what it says. Neither do you, but it's beautiful spirals and wedges etched with patient hands. Later, you cross a narrow river. The trader points out an old bridge, foundation stone blocks, set into the bank, now half swallowed by reeds. built by a king who thought he could damn the world," he mutters, shaking his head. The donkey gets tired, of course, so you stop. You eat lentils and dried figs, drink water that tastes faintly of copper from a skin bladder. The trader tells you about amber beads from the north, traded down river routes until they shimmered in temples 1,000 miles away, about 10 caravans that once vanished into the mountains, never seen again, about a man who swore he saw a phoenix nesting in a myrrh tree. You walk on, past a shrine, a simple stone stack smeared with ochre, guarded by a ring of flowers and the bone of some unlucky animal. The trader leaves a sliver of bread and a smile. "For a safe eat," he says. "At sunset, you camp beneath an overhang of rock where someone's scratched a ship into the wall. A real Bronze Age cargo ship. Sails wide, hulls stacked with crates, oars reaching like insect legs." The trader sighs. "Someday," he says, "I'll sail to the end of the world." There's something comforting in the rhythm of trade. The slow barter, the weighed pouch of barley, the quiet nods of agreement. No contracts, no spreadsheets. Just trust, reputation, and the occasional goat thrown in to seal the deal. As night falls, you lie beneath a donkey-est, sleepy breath and the sound of beads clicking in a leather pouch. The stars wheel overhead like travelers who lost the road and never minded. And you realize, on foot, on boat, through dust and story, the Bronze Age is always moving. You awake to birdsong and the creak of wooden wheels in the distance. Today you're heading toward a Bronze Age palace, not one of the mighty ones etched in myth, but a smaller, regional seat of power. It's a rectangular sprawl of sun-baked mud brick and timber, nestled on a bluff overlooking an irrigation canal. The guards at the gate are half asleep, leaning on their spears with the air of men who haven't seen a real threat in years. They wave your group through after the trader mentions a name and slips them a strip of salted fish. Bribery. Not really. Just how things are done. Inside, the palace buzzes. Not with dancing or gold or flutes with accounting. The heart of the Bronze Age palace is a room full of scribes hunched over clay tablets, tallying grain, listing oxen, recording who owes what to whom. One scribe waves you over. He's a young man with ink-stained fingers and an amused look in his eyes. "Want to see something fun?" he asks, and he shows you a tablet covered, not in neat columns, but in a poem, a bawdy, slightly nonsensical poem about a lazy god, an overcooked onion, and a very confused chicken. "The overseer hasn't noticed," he whispers. "Yet, every palace has its rhythms." You wander through chambers lined with painted plaster earthy reds and faded indigos, showing kings hunting lions, queens with lotus flowers, priests holding up burning offerings. One wall even features a map of sorts of stylized landscape, with rivers like coiled snakes and cities marked by small towers. Historians still debate whether these were literal or symbolic. Did Bronze Age rulers really know their neighbors, or did they just pretend to? The food storage rooms are the size of barns, stacked with clay jars, sealed with bit. You're told they hold beer, oil, honey, and more beer, because beer is not a luxury, it's a staple. In fact, one of the scribes tells you, laughing, part of the palace tax system includes daily beer rations, carefully recorded and often, conveniently, lost. In the back courtyard, workers bake bread in dome-shaped ovens, using wooden paddles and flat stones. You sneak a taste of chewy, smoky bite dotted with herbs. One of the cooks hands you a lump of dough, with a wink, and lets you slap it against the oven wall yourself. It bubbles, crisps, and peels off like magic. A small reminder that power is often measured in calories. You pass the throne room. It's quieter than expected. No fanfare, just a raised seat carved with lions, worn smooth by centuries of anxious rulers fidgeting through long meetings. A courtier tells you, the king has gone hawking, which may or may not be code for took a nap somewhere. Behind the palace, a small garden offers shade. You see date palms, pomegranates, and a few withered fig trees, their roots curling around stone basins, where water trickles from a narrow clay pipe. A young girl is gathering flower petals for perfume. She hums a lullaby you don't recognize. And then there's the temple, tucked within the palace walls, as though rulers and gods must share a kitchen. You're shown the altar, the offertory bowls, the soot-stained ceiling from too many fire rituals. You see gold foil pressed onto faded wooden idols, and a cracked incense burner shaped like a bull's head. The priest says it's been used every day for 50 years. Even when it rains sideways, he adds, solemnly. You sit for a while in the corridor where scribes dry their tablets in the sun. A boy brings you water in a cup shaped like a duck. You drink slowly, watching the palace breathe a living organism of mud and ambition, of small rituals and grand paperwork. It's not glamorous. It's not what the epics promised, but it's real. And you realize the Bronze Age palace isn't a monument, it's an engine, churning out trade, stories, taxes, and bread. And if you listen closely, even the walls whisper in cuneiform syllables. Remember this. You leave the palace at dawn, feet dusty again, the scent of last night's bread still lingering in your satchel. The landscape rolls out ahead, sun-scorched fields, half-dried canals, the occasional shepherd waving from the hills. But today your destination is something different, something quieter. You're visiting a Bronze Age burial site. The mound rises ahead like a sleeping giant under a faded sky, a low, grassy dome, ringed with white stones, some standing, others slumped like dozing elders. Nearby, a shallow trench reveals part of the tomb's strugged mud-brick chambers, stone-lined pits, shards of painted pottery poking through the soil. An elderly caretaker greets you. He walks with a stick carved with spirals, which he swears was a gift from a king, or maybe a potter. His memory's fuzzy, but his voice is steady as he guides you into the tomb's entrance, ducking beneath a lintel, etched with unfamiliar symbols, maybe names, maybe prayers. Historians still argue whether they record lineage, possessions, or simply warnings not to steal the bronze. Inside, it's cool. The air smells of earth and faint resin. You move through chambers, dimly lit by skylights cut through stone slabs above. It's not grand, no gold masks or cursed jewels, but deeply personal. A shallow grave holds a woman curled on her side, surrounded by everyday items. A spindle whorl, a bowl of once honey, and a small bronze knife worn down from use. You imagine her life. Was she a weaver, a healer, a traveler like you? Her bones don't say, but the careful arrangement of her tools suggests respect not for her power, perhaps, but for her role. In another chamber, two skeletons lie head to head with arms stretched out. Between them sits a carved box, empty. The guide says no one knows what it held. Maybe a song, he offers, or just something sweet. Nearby, the remains of a child buried with a toy cart. Its wheels now just faint wooden shadows in the dust. Your throat catches. There's something heartbreakingly universal about it, the instinct to offer comfort, even in death. The guide shows you bits of the burial ritual. Narrow offering pits, once filled with barley cakes and dates, faded red ochre smeared on bones, likely symbolic of life or blood. There's even a broken mirror shard placed under one body's tongue, which some believe allowed the spirit to see its way to the next world. Others think it was just a superstition. No one really knows. Above ground, you watch a group of locals tending the site. They're not archaeologists, just farmers and stonemasons whose families have watched over the mound for generations. One of them tells you that during heavy rains, the ghosts hum. You raise an eyebrow, and he grins. Or maybe it's just frogs. Later, you sit under an acacia tree, sketching the layout of the tomb in the dirt. A boy joins you, mimicking your lines with a stick. When you're done, he draws his own, a triangle, a wave, and something like a star. And in that quiet moment, it hits you. Burial isn't just about endings, it's a kind of memory. A final sentence in a very long letter. These tombs are love letters to lives, lived in dust and clay and laughter. You walk back slowly, past fields of barley and sheep that barely blink as you pass. Overhead, Vultures circle lazily, not ominous, just curious. The sun lowers, casting long shadows over the mound. Behind you, the burial site settles again into silence. Not sorrowful, just still. The kind of stillness that feels like respect. And in your bones, you carry the weight of all the lives laid carefully beneath the earth. Ordinary lives, and somehow, that makes them even more extraordinary. You leave the palace at dawn, feet dusty again, the scent of last night's bread still lingering in your satchel. The landscape rolls out ahead, sun-scorched fields, half-dried canals, the occasional shepherd waving from the hills. But today your destination is something different, something quieter. You're visiting a Bronze Age burial site. The mound rises ahead like a sleeping giant under a faded sky. A low, grassy dome, ringed with white stones, some standing, others slumped like dozing elders. Nearby, a shallow trench reveals part of the tomb's strugged mud-brick chambers, stone-lined pits, shards of painted pottery poking through the soil. An elderly caretaker greets you. He walks with a stick carved with spirals, which he swears was a gift from a king, or maybe a potter. His memory's fuzzy, but his voice is steady as he guides you into the tomb's entrance, ducking beneath a lintel, etched with unfamiliar symbols, maybe names, maybe prayers. Historians still argue whether they record lineage, possessions, or simply warnings not to steal the bronze. Inside, it's cool. The air smells of earth and faint resin. You move through chambers, dimly lit by skylights cut through stone slabs above. It's not grand, no gold masks or cursed jewels, but deeply personal. A shallow grave holds a woman curled on her side, surrounded by everyday items. A spindle whorl, a bowl of once honey, and a small bronze knife worn down from use. You imagine her life. Was she a weaver, a healer, a traveler like you? Her bones don't say, but the careful arrangement of her tools suggests respect not for her power, perhaps, but for her role. In another chamber, two skeletons lie head to head with arms stretched out. Between them sits a carved box, empty. The guide says no one knows what it held. Maybe a song, he offers, or just something sweet. Nearby, the remains of a child buried with a toy cart. Its wheels now just faint wooden shadows in the dust. Your throat catches. There's something heartbreakingly universal about it, the instinct to offer comfort, even in death. The guide shows you bits of the burial ritual. Narrow offering pits, once filled with barley cakes and dates. Faded red ochre smeared on bones, likely symbolic of life or blood. There's even a broken mirror shard placed under one body's tongue, which some believe allowed the spirit to see its way to the next world. Others think it was just a superstition. No one really knows. Above ground, you watch a group of locals tending the site. They're not archaeologists, just farmers and stonemasons, whose families have watched over the mound for generations. One of them tells you that during heavy rains, the ghosts hum. You raise an eyebrow, and he grins. Or maybe it's just frogs. Later, you sit under an acacia tree, sketching the layout of the tomb in the dirt. A boy joins you, mimicking your lines with a stick. When you're done, he draws his own, a triangle, a wave, and something like a star. And in that quiet moment, it hits you. Burial isn't just about endings, it's a kind of memory. A final sentence in a very long letter. These tombs are love letters to lives, lived in dust and clay and laughter. You walk back slowly, past fields of barley and sheep that barely blink as you pass. Overhead, vultures circle lazily, not ominous, just curious. The sun lowers, casting long shadows over the mound. Behind you, the burial site settles again into silence. Not sorrowful, just still. The kind of stillness that feels like respect. And in your bones, you carry the weight of all the lives laid carefully beneath the earth. Ordinary lives, and somehow, that makes them even more extraordinary. You wake before dawn to the sound of pots clinking and the low murmur of voices. Today, you're traveling with a small caravan. Nothing too glamorous, just 3 donkeys, a handful of baskets, and two extremely opinionated grandmothers who argue over the best kind of dried fig. You're joining them to experience trade and travel in the Bronze Ajda, humble backbone of civilization. Your feet are already sore before you've left the outskirts of town. The path is uneven, dotted with goat prints, and the occasional suspicious puddle. The lead donkey, whose name is either Fish or Stubborn, depending on who you ask, moves with the confidence of a creature who has seen too many rivers and lived to tell the tale. The goods, mostly textiles, oil, dried fruit, and a few tinning, packed tightly in leather and straw. Nothing glitters, but this little caravan is the Bronze Age version of an email inbox. Steady, persistent, and loaded with essential information. Traders weren't just merchants, they were gossip carriers, translators, amateur weather predictors, and sometimes low-key spies. You pass other travelers. A man leading sheep with painted horns, a young woman balancing pottery on her head, a group of messengers blowing on crooked horns, like they're in a very sleepy parade. At a crossroads, someone offers you a fig in exchange for a joke. You're bad at jokes, but you try. He gives you half a fig. Fair. By midday, the sun is oppressive. The donkeys refuse to move unless bribed with dates. You all huddle beneath a scraggly tree while the grandmothers argue over the best route to the next village. One insists on the old salt road. The other insists it no longer exists. Like your memory, she snaps. You eat lentil cakes and pretend not to take sides. Eventually, you arrive at a small trading outpost, just a few buildings nestled beside a river. People from different cultures bustle through, some with painted faces, others wearing copper bracelets or sky blue linen. You hear languages you don't understand, smell fish, wine, goat cheese, and something sweet that might be honey or might be tree sap. A scribe sits cross-legged under a canopy, writing tally marks on a clay tablet with a stylus made from a bird bone. He's recording trade quantities. 4 jars of oil for 2 lengths of wool. One trader tries to haggle by offering a song. The scribe pretends not to hear. You watch a potter carefully pack his wares in straw, muttering a prayer with each pot. Another man sells beads that glitter like stars. From far to the east, he claims, past the rivers, past the clouds. The historians still debate how far some of these routes stretched, how much was real, and how much was exaggeration spun by a tired man with a bag of rocks and big dreams. You trade one of your sandals worn but handmade for a packet of dried dates. It seems fair. You're too tired to argue. That night, everyone camps near a ridge, fires flickering, donkeys snoring. The grandmothers tell stories. One about a merchant who married a storm goddess. Another about a caravan that disappeared into the sand but left behind gold coins that always tasted of salt. You'll lie back on a woven mat, staring at stars that seem larger out here, more ancient. It's easy to forget how connected this world is. Without roads, without maps, without Google Translate, they made it work. They exchanged not just goods, but ideas, styles, songs, and jokes that no one else found funny. The Bronze Age was never static. It was on the move, always. You close your eyes as the fire dies down, and the last thing you hear is one of the grandmothers whispering to the donkey, "Fish, if you eat my figs again, I'll turn you into stew." And honestly, you believe her. Morning finds you, stretching your sore legs beside a gently steaming spring, your makeshift pillow still bearing the faint scent of donkey. Today's leg of the journey, Bronze Age belief, the sacred sites, tucked between valleys and cliff faces where ancient peoples tried to whisper back to the gods. You set off at a slower pace now, following a path etched by centuries of bare feet and hooves. The terrain grows rockier, and the chatter of fellow travelers fades behind you. You're aiming for a place known in hushed tones. Not quite a temple, not quite a tomb, something older, stranger. The first sign is a cluster of standing stones, lopsided and jutting out of the earth like the vertebrae of some long-dead god. They form a circle not perfect, but intentional. At its center lies a flat stone, pitted by weather and time. Faint grooves carved across its surface. Was it a table? An altar? A calendar? Archaeologists still debate the site's purpose, caught between interpretations that range from burial ground to druidic moon clock to ancient picnic spot. You sit for a moment on a stone and close your eyes. The wind hums low, and in the silence you can almost feel the weight of generations. People came here with offerings, bone charms, bits of amber, milk in small clay bowls that carved spirals into the rocks. Not to be understood, but remembered. Nearby, a hillside cave opens like a yawning mouth. You duck inside, torch in hand. The walls are painted red, ochre animals, stick figures dancing, symbols repeating like a forgotten script. A smooth hollow in the floor once held water for reflection. You try peering in, but the surface just shows your tired face and a spider doing laps. You think about the practical magic of the Bronze Age. No fireballs or ritual. Patterns. The careful weaving of daily life with symbolic gesture. A woman grinding grain might murmur a chant. A shepherd might knot his cords in a protective spiral. Not out of superstition, but habit, meaning wrapped around motion like thread. Atop a nearby ridge, you find a burial mound, partially collapsed, partially excavated. Inside, bones curled like commas, buried with a bronze blade, some beads, and a carved bird. Maybe it was a warrior, or a weaver, or someone who loved birds. The Bronze Age was generous with its mysteries. You pause to build a small cairn beside the mound, because it feels right. A gesture to no one, or maybe to everyone. As the sun climbs, you descend toward a hidden spring, fed by a mineral-rich pool. Locals believed it had healing properties. You remove your sandals and step in. The water is cool, smooth as poured milk. You sit quietly, imagining how many people have done this before you. Aching backs, blistered feet, silent prayers, and maybe, just maybe, a moment of peace. The spring gurgles. A bird sings from a nearby fig tree. Somewhere in the distance, the grandmothers are arguing again, probably about figs. You smile and close your eyes. The trail leads downward now, winding toward the coast where land yields to water, and the Bronze Age world meets the sea. You smell salt before you see it, and then, like a curtain lifted, the horizon stretches wide and blue. A coastal village clings to the cliffs ahead, where fishing boats and trade ships bob together in a sleepy bay. You wander into the harbor just as the first boats come in. There, hum below, wooden things with woven sails and curved prows, their holes patched like an old pair of trousers. The fishermen unload their catch. Silver-scaled fish, tiny octopuses, and once a shoe they swear belonged to a sea god. This is where Bronze Age lives meet open water, and where tin, copper, wool, resin, spices, and rumors all wash ashore. You sit beneath a crooked awning with a view of the docks, sipping something that tastes like fermented honey and regret. Listening to sailors argue over which port has the worst bread. You learn about the Alubioran shipwreck, a real Bronze Age vessel discovered by modern divers carrying elephants, tusks, Canaanite jars, Mycenaean swords, and a single gold scarab marked with Nefertiti's name. Historians still argue. One grizzled sailor mutters whether it was bound for war, for wedding, or just very, very lost. The harbor master wanders past, scratching notes into a plank of wood. He's keeping tally with notches and borrowed string. Nearby, two children are building a model boat from driftwood and string. Their sail is a scrap of linen with a fish drawn on it, smiling toothily. You give it a push, and it wobbles off into the tide. You walk along the cliff pass, stopping where locals have carved tiny shrines into sea-facing rocks. One holds a bowl of olive oil with a floating wick. Another, a fist-sized stone painted to look like an eye. These votives are left to protect sailors, summon winds, or just thank the sea for not swallowing anyone that day. Further inland, the houses are made of sun-baked clay with flat roofs and woven mats for doors. Women sit weaving by the shade of low walls, their looms balanced on knees. One offers to teach you a pattern that looks like ocean waves, but it's harder than it seems. Your first attempt looks like a sea monster eating a hat. She nods politely. In the marketplace, vendors sell salted fish, dyed cloth, bronze hooks, and one extremely loud rooster. A foreign merchant tries to sell you a perfume made from crushed shellfish. You don't buy it, but now you smell like the inside of Poseidon's armpit. As twilight softens the sky, the villagers gather on the shore. A flute plays somewhere, and small fires are lit in bowls of sand. This is no official ritual, just a habit, a way to mark the day's end. People talk, laugh, throw pebbles into the sea. One old man tells a story about a ship that left at sunset and returned with its crew turned into gulls. It's true, he says. They still squawk in dialect. You sit beside him, watching the last bit of sunlight slip beneath the waves. This place isn't a center of empire or a battlefield. It's not famous, but it connects all the parts of the Bronze Age you've wandered through. Tin mines, the farmers, the temples, the traders. It's a crossroads, held together by weathered rope, salted wind, and everyday people who make the extraordinary possible by simply getting on with their day. A soft breeze brushes past, and you close your eyes. Morning begins with gulls crying overhead and the rhythmic slosh of water against the harbor wall. You stretch, back stiff from sleeping on a woven mat, and take in the final hours of your Bronze Age journey. Today, you drift through the quiet edges of this coastal village, not to seek trade or legend, but to witness how a day ends in this ancient world. You follow a woman walking down a dusty lane, a bundle of herbs in one hand and a sleepy goat trailing behind her. She offers you a sprig of thyme, which she tucks behind your ear before disappearing into a sun-dappled doorway. The goat stays. As you walk, you notice the little things. A child painting a spiral on a shard of pottery with berry juice. An old man sharpening a bronze sickle with a smooth river stone. A fig tree heavy with ripening fruit. And one very smug crow. You climb the low hill behind the village and look out. To the left, the sea curls inward like a closing hand. To the right, hills dotted with olive trees stretch back toward the interior, toward everything you've already passed. You're not leaving the Bronze Age behind so much as fading gently from it, like a footprint slowly softened by wind and time. Down in the village, smoke curls from clay ovens. Evening meals are beginning. A fish stew with coriander, flatbreads dotted with sesame. Someone is baking honey cakes, and you swear you could cry from how good they smell. You sit near the edge of the hill, beside a small shrine carved into the rock, just a hollow with 2 pebbles and a smooth, egg-shaped stone at its center. You add your own offering, a shell from the shore, pale, pink, and imperfect. You whisper nothing in particular. The act is enough. You think back through the temples and trade routes, the farmers, the warriors, the poets, the miners, the nomads, the sacred caves, the perfumed rooms, and the flickering lamps. All of it was the Bronze Age. Not a single moment or place, but a rhythm, a long, looping song played across centuries. Historians still argue whether it ended in fire, famine, or slow transformation. But for the people who lived it, the Bronze Age was just life, days stacked gently atop days. As darkness falls, you rejoin the villagers by the water one last time. A flute plays again, the same melody as before, but slower. A child falls asleep in a mother's lap. Someone begins to hum, and just as the stars begin to bloom above, a hush falls. Even the sea seems to pause. And so, under the first gleam of starlight, you close your eyes and finally let the ancient world drift away.